When the term assault mech is uttered, often mech warriors and commanders' minds drift towards some of the most horrifying mechs in the history of warfare. King crabs, stone rhinos, highlanders, executioners, and of course, quite frequently heading up this terrifying cadre of war machines would be titans like the Atlas. But, frequently, people are too quick to forget that simply because something is big, or even expensive, does not mean that it is worthwhile, or even halfway effective. The Republic of the Sphere, the central power of the Dark Age of Battletech, would create many monsters to face down its endless waves of enemies. The Lament, Prefect, Dolaire, and super heavy tripods like the Ares can all come to mind in regards to its military contributions to the setting. These machines have a reputation for fighting hard in the dying years of the state as it desperately tried to stem the bleeding of worlds and soldiers across this new empire's territory. In this video, we are going to examine a 100-ton assault mech, built by the Republic of the Sphere, and principally for the Republic Armed Forces, that failed to live up to expectations, at least when you rationally look at it. Worse, it is both wasteful and trying to find a niche to fill. Repeatedly reworked by the Republic and its manufacturers through multiple configurations in a vain attempt to find meaning for this battle mech, there is perhaps no war machine that so closely defines the Republic itself, being almost a totem mech in spirit, inside and outside of the universe. So, without further delay, let us begin to examine the wasteful, underperforming, expensive, aptly named machine, for it shows true hatred towards those who made it and pilot it. The Malice. There was a crime committed against the military-industrial capacity of the Republic of the Sphere prior to the HPG Blackout, which took place in 3132. Development of a new assault mech began with cooperation between Eris Enterprises Design Group and Dynamic Ordnance and Ammunition to create a new 100-ton machine for broad distribution, but most principally for the Republic of the Sphere. Now, one may ask, how is this a crime? Beyond the idea, of course, that it is a crime to develop a giant, fusion-powered walking battle mech that destroys the lives of countless people, that is. No, it was not a crime against humanity as a whole, but a crime against the Republic, as well as anyone foolish enough to invest such resources into the product in question. The MAL series of mechs, or the Malice series, was envisioned as a relatively quick-moving 100-ton assault mech. It was always meant to be a ballistics machine, and it must have been meant to have some type of dedicated fire support role, ideally, in combined arms formations. Some of this information has to be concluded based on the configuration of the mech, rather than the technical readout entries in any of the major sourcebooks, as it doesn't really imply to its main purpose, unless that main purpose is annihilating a few units of battle armor in a lopsided engagement over open ground. Because that's right, under development, in the TRO, typically mechs will be displayed at their best, or in a defining way. The Malice, in its own entry, more or less fights an enemy, which it hands down outperforms, due to that enemy being battle armor in open ground. The attack itself was on a Lyran outpost. In terms of battle mechs deployed against it, it was defended by mediums, and the Malices are backed by assault tanks to take on the medium mech defenders. To portray this assault mech in a positive light, it had to fight in an overwhelmingly lopsided engagement against glorified infantry. We will get to the technical portion of the Malice eventually, but let's just say it's remarkably fitting that the Malice only has the ability to punch down, because of how ill-conceived the mech truly is. It allocates a huge amount of its volume towards its enormous engine and armor, and then dedicates its offensive tonnage to weaponry that doesn't really perform under almost any conditions. It has been compared to a 100-ton rifleman, as many would assume that it is in fact an anti-air weapon. But this is not the case. Nor is the Malice directly related to the rifleman even. No, it is not an anti-aircraft mech. It is in fact either a fire support mech, or delusionally it may have been manufactured for direct engagements, given some of the wording around the machine and its deployments. That's right, a 100-ton battle mech with 4 medium lasers as its main up-close fighting capabilities. That isn't a missile boat, you say? Sign me up, said the Mercenaries and the Republic as they purchased these in droves. Oh, by the way, apparently the Malice was bought in huge quantities by Mercenaries, and by the Republic, even in its most primitive configuration. It is literally bewildering given its potential battlefield performance, that this money sink would sell in high quantities. Its enormous engine alone would make it extremely expensive, and it is outgunned by multiple Succession Wars era Inner Sphere assault mechs. That's no joke, by the way. The Republic, shortly after the Malice started to be manufactured in 3132, would suffer, along with the rest of the Inner Sphere, the HPG Blackout. In the coming internal strife and the wars across the region, the Malice and the Republic armed forces would be tested against enemies on all sides. This would be a cauldron of violence and chaos that would determine the future of the Inner Sphere. The Malice would fail to keep the Republic safe, as first Separatists broke worlds from the grip of Terra, before armies from the Capellan Confederation and later Draconis Combine shattered the defenses of the beleaguered state. Next, the clans would march on this dying empire, breaking through the Republic of the Sphere's outer defenses as well, and began ripping through competently built machines like the Lament, let alone incompetent boondoggles like the Malice. Even as its allies in the Dominion and Federated Suns eventually woke up to what was happening, all while facing down their own problems, the Republic and the Malice would not hold strong. The Fortress Republic would be razed, buying the state some time, only for it to be annihilated, after giving Clan Wolf the passcode to get past their jump ship wall, in hopes of facing their enemies piecemeal. The Wolves, being 10 steps ahead, of course, simply invited others to come with them, and the rest is history. The Republic and Terra fell. The Malice falling along with them. Its primary manufacturing worlds still persist, and it is still manufactured to this day, being bought in huge numbers apparently by mercenaries. One must assume that the mercenaries who procure this badly conceived relic from a dead failed state must be on the lower IQ side of private military contractors in the 32nd century. But you never know. Maybe they just like the wonderful glow of 100-ton fireworks displays. Regardless, the Malice seems to be one of the persistent legacies of the Republic of the Sphere. Generations of widows and orphans will curse its name for centuries to come, not because it killed their parents and partners on the battlefield by shooting at them, but because they piloted this heap of junk to their graves. The primary configuration of the MAL series is the MAL XT Malice. This is likely due to the fact that the MAL XP, a more advanced, yet still mediocre configuration of the Malice, despite being built first, has even a larger price tag affiliated with it, and rarer, more sophisticated technologies which it relies on, thus putting the MAL XT as the face of this heinously bad assault mech. Weighing in at 100 tons, the Malice is an expensive, undergunned, vulnerable disaster of a battle mech, with no real clearly stated mission goal for the mech, and it must be assumed that it's meant to participate in long-range fire support battles, or it is meant to act as a battlefield generalist. These are the two jobs the MAL-XT broadly, specifically, also fails at. It fails even more remarkably when taking into consideration its extremely high cost in terms of monetary value, let alone its in-game cost as well. To begin the examination of this recklessly expensive tire fire, let's start with its endosteel internal structure, which helps the mech save 5 tons. This weight, of course, is saved in order to help it acquire more ineffectual weaponry, so its tonnage is well spent, I guess. The cost of using endosteel isn't just a monetary one, but in-game, it means the MAL XT consumes a larger amount of critical space in exchange for tonnage. After this, it has a standard gyro and cockpit on board, which is more than normal, in order to handle its deadly heat threshold, created by its smattering of medium lasers. The Malice has 12 double heatsinks on board, letting it cool 24 per turn. This means that it is heat neutral when standing still and alpha striking. No need to be concerned about stressing this puppy, oh no. It can alpha strike all day, every day. Maybe enemy pheasants will notice. For electronic systems on board, the Battlemech is equipped with a Neil 8000 communications package, as well as a Dynatech 2780 targeting and tracking system. Much to my chagrin, these systems don't provide it with any more handicaps in the advanced rules to make it even less effective than it already is. It seems that the pubs didn't pull out all the stops, unfortunately, to try to make the worst mech they could. The Malice, in fact, only has one trait using the advanced quirk system, which is the protected actuators attribute. Because of its double knees, basically, it is prevented from having infantry just simply bombing its actuators. If only the rest of the mech had so much detailed attention paid to it. 100-ton battlemechs often aren't renowned for their rapid footwork, though they can achieve some functional mobility with the right engine. The largest single tonnage and cost investment the Malice makes is its gigantic onboard power plant, being driven forward by a 26.5-ton LTV 400XL Fusion engine. The MAL XT can reach a maximum speed of 64 km per hour, or 6 movement points in the tabletop game. This is actually one of the mech's better features, despite the heavy price that has to be paid for the engine in 2 key respects. First, it's the most expensive non-double XL engine that can be placed in any machine, in terms of cost of production. Second, it adds the distinct vulnerability of engine death to the mech upon the loss of a side torso. The upside to this is simple. It can move at the pace of inner sphere battle line formations, and when it comes to either providing long-range direct fire support or, bafflingly, being a generalist assault mech, this means that the Malice can attempt to inadequately do both of these jobs in most formations it is placed with, and that is because of this wonderful engine. Funnily enough, had its power plant been smaller, and the mech slower, the mech's pilots might have thanked it more, because it's harder to get into combat if you're struggling to get to the battlefield itself. It might be fast for a 100-ton assault mech, but it's going to have trouble getting away. There's a false sense of security for the MAL XT, and several other configurations of this travesty. Why, may you ask, would I say that? Because on paper, the Malice appears to be well defended due to having a large amount of armored plating. By the way, it does have 19.5 tons of standard plating, giving it the maximum armor points possible in-game for a 100-ton assault mech, which is 307 points. So it does indeed have a tough outer shell to get through. However, the Malice has no other defensive systems. That's right. This is it. Now, you may say, why is that a big deal? Well, for starters, it has some sensitive materials on board, like 4 tons of autocannon ammunition found in its side torsos. There's no case, or case 2, for that volatile material. This means that should it be struck, not only will the mech be disabled from the destruction of its side torso, the entire chassis will likely explode, and it has an enhanced chance of immediately killing the pilot. This very much makes the XT an exploding metal casket for the Mechwarrior within. If the auto-eject fails, of course. Truly, this mech was built with the pilot's safety in mind. The failure of almost every single Malice is its weaponry. I'm going to fire from the hip here and just say that it is not sufficiently gunned to be a significant threat to any peer adversary, or really anything that its cost and tonnage dictates it should be taken care of. Mechs like the King Crab, Atlas, Direwolf, and Stone Rhino are the same mass as this mech, for instance. One might argue, of course, that the Malice has a bigger engine than these mechs, so it is unfair to compare it to them. But even correspondingly paced 100-tonners, like the Kodiak or Grand Titan, will make a fool of the MAL XT, and most of its alternate variants as well. So, this is its Achilles heel, because the Malice is embarrassingly equipped for almost any mission role. Its primary armaments are quad Miradon XL 5SG LB5X autocannons, with 4 tons of ammunition. One cannon can be found in each arm and side torso. These are long-range weapons, reaching out to the distances of LRMs, and either fire solid slugs or cluster ammunition. They also weigh, collectively, 36 tons including their ammunition. 36 tons to do 20 points of damage, if all 4 hit, and all fire solid rounds. If they fire cluster rounds, it will average 12 to 14 damage if all cannons hit. A single LRM-20 launcher, which weighs a third of this total, averages the same damage. A single Gauss rifle weighs half as much and does concentrated damage and comparable damage. This kind of allocation of weaponry to a mech of this type should be legally and criminally negligent in my eyes. Unless opposed by tanks, infantry, VTOLs, or light battle mechs, this firepower borders on being an annoyance. For its backup weaponry, it has 4 diverse optics Sunfire extended range medium lasers. These weigh 4 tons and literally do the exact same damage as the cannons. All told, if every weapon system hits, and it's using solid slug rounds, the Malice can do 40 points of damage. An AS-7D Atlas from the Succession Wars outguns this embarrassment. A mech without an XL engine, endosteel, or advanced Star League era weaponry, in other words. To summarize the MAL XT Malice, it is an atrocity of a battle mech. While there will be instances of lucky shots some will claim, or instances where it paid off having it, overwhelmingly its nebulous rules are just handled better by vastly cheaper and more effective battle mechs, both in BV and real cost. The Republic created a mech which has a giant engine, which is vulnerable to make a 100-ton mech that's not trying to brawl and throw its weight around move 64 kilometers per hour. It has 19.5 tons of armor, but no case to protect the mech and pilot from dying in an impending ammunition explosion, via a normal critical hit or even a through-armor critical. And they armed it like an oversized Jaeger mech, but didn't give it the purpose of shooting down aerospace fighters or VTOLs. It's a general-purpose assault mech. No, actually, let me correct that. It's an overpriced embarrassment. Especially when you factor in that this is a battle mech from the same era of warfare as the AS-8 series of Atlas, or monsters like the Tenshi from the Draconis Combine. If you're wondering how the DCMS broke through and retook Dairon Military District, the MAL-XT and the Republic Armed Forces Procurement Office might be a good explanation for how those lines collapsed. The original Malice, interestingly, was not the XT, but its more expensive cousin, the XP. This more advanced juggernaut, at first glance, seems to be much more robust in comparison to its mainline production model. It seems that way until you look below the surface. Its internal components are nearly identical, except for the fact that it reduces its heat sinks from 12 to 10, meaning it cools 20 per turn, which is fine. Beyond this, the MAL XP has a wildly different and more effective weapons package, because the XP has an entirely clan-based loadout of weaponry. It has twin LBX-5 cannons, which are mounted in the side torsos, and twin LBX-10 cannons, which are mounted into the arms. Then, to finish things off, it has 2 clan ER medium lasers. So I guess that means the mech is good, right? Fast, heavily armored, and better gunned, right? Well, it's definitely better than the XT, but is it good? These upgrades, after all, do increase its firepower. Marginally. It loses out on 2 medium lasers, but Clan Tech mediums do hit harder. But not that much harder. Its LB5s go further, but they are just as useless, and can fire 20 times per cannon just as before. Its LB10s definitely hit harder, both with solid and cluster ammunition, for which it has 40 rounds for the 2 guns. But if all 4 autocannons hit, it still only does 30 damage. And that's assuming that they aren't being fired in cluster mode. Now, this damage does start bordering some inner sphere mechs of this size in damage, but not necessarily in concentration. It's fine to crit fish, but it doesn't always work, especially if you just don't have the sandblasting power. It's just not heavily gunned for its size, in other words. Its damage is still too unreliable, especially if it's trading shots with heavies and assaults. And, funnily enough, its durability is not improved. Indeed, it's actually worse, as it has 2 more tons of ammunition on board, and still has no case system. There's a 1 in 3 chance that if the right or left torso is critically hit, ammunition will ignite. With floating TACs or a normal critical hit, this is a horror show for the Malice pilot. Being better than the XT is not a pass, especially when it comes to the cost of a higher battle value, and it has a much higher cost of production, therefore a higher price tag. It's an expensive mech, whose job is again handled better by cheaper mechs. The guns don't match the engine or the armor. The most heavily gunned configuration of the Malice, as well as a well-protected one, the MAL-XV comes the closest to being a capable battle mech on the battlefield, but must expose itself to far more intense fire to enter an effective fighting range. The LB autocannons are abandoned in their entirety and are replaced with 4 light AC-5 cannons. These are then backed up by 4 improved heavy-medium lasers, which are clan-quality weapons. The Malice then has 17 double heatsinks, letting it cool 34 every turn. It can alpha strike relatively safely, and will deliver a huge punch of 60 damage every turn if all weapons hit. This is actually a pretty effective damage dealer, but there are drawbacks. To achieve this level of output, it's dependent on improved heavy-medium lasers, which do, you know, explode if they are critically hit, just like ammunition. Their range is also very short for the Dark Age, being that of a traditional inner sphere medium laser, meaning they don't really start being effective until around 6 hexes, though they can start being used out until 9 hexes. Its cannons are also very much reduced in their distance, in that they can only fire 15 hexes each as well, and their damage is still questionable. They do have options for specialist ammunition types, of course, but this doesn't necessarily make these the most worthwhile. It also has 8 tons of ammunition on board. When factoring that in, along with its improved heavy lasers in the side torsos, there is a greater than 50% chance on a critical hit that something will catastrophically explode inside of the mech on a TAC or critical. Now, there is one big improvement in that it does have a Case 2 system on board, and that improves the mech's durability dramatically. But ammunition explosions are still crippling, and this mech is genuinely a walking bomb. Also, the arms have these improved heavy lasers as well, once more increasing the chance of something catastrophic happening, and there are no cases there. Oh, it has a C3 slave too, though this has limited use in an era with such little C3 usage. Overall, the XV is probably the best Malice, and it can work, but it is a close-range brawler, and one which is surprisingly more fragile than you might expect. It pays a high price to be able to contend in the realm of damage, the way it does. The final configuration designed for the Malice in 3142, at least as of the making of this video, is the MAL-YZ. The MAL-YZ is, in a few words, a calamity of waste, and proof that hubris will be with mankind well into the 3000s. The MAL-YZ is the equivalent of taking a rotten fish, wrapping it in gold, and then eating it, in the hopes that it will taste better. It is one of the most expensive battle mechs I've yet laid eyes on due to its bewilderingly expensive loadout, and yet it is desperately ineffective and undergunned. So where do we even begin with this genuine travesty? I guess we can begin with the most obscene element. In order to save weight, and at immense cost, both in BV and the equivalent of C-bills, the MALYZ has a Clantech 400 XXL engine. This makes its side torso XL slots go up, and it generates more heat for the mech inherently, making it harder to keep cool. Then, as if the mech wasn't expensive enough, it installs ferro-lamellar armor, the most expensive plating possible. It does reduce 1 damage for every 5 points, and makes the mech impervious to 1 damage scatter weapons like LBX cluster rounds. It also maintains its original heatsink total, which is actually a problem, and it adds 2 impotent coolant pods to try to keep the mech in any way functional. Spoiler, it doesn't. The mech's speed is dropped to 54 km per hour despite its huge and wildly expensive engine, because of the addition of modular armor. It has 1 ton of this material on every part of the mech, adding another 10 points of protection in essence, making it even more durable. They also make the mech harder to pilot, giving it a 1 penalty to all piloting skill rolls. An Angel ECM is on board too, adding more defenses to the mech. It then has twin laser AMS systems on board, and a clan tag. Before getting into its weapons, it also has twin remote sensor dispensers, with 30 per side torso. Well, with all that, clearly this mech has a huge amount of money put into it. It's one of the most expensive battle mechs in history. It would be a shame if it was so thermally challenged it could barely function on the battlefield any turn it doesn't use a coolant pod. So the MALYZ has twin clan ER large lasers, and twin clan large pulse lasers. That's great, those weapons do real concentrated damage. They have great range too, and they're very accurate. They are just useless, because the mech can't fire both ER large lasers without overheating on its own. It can't even fire 1 pulse laser and 1 ER laser without going over its threshold if it walks, because of its double XL engine. This means it functionally does less damage than the XP or the XT. It is completely out of control in terms of its cost and expenses. It has an abundance of the toughest armor known to the Inner Sphere. It has the most powerful and expensive engine possible, and it is outgunned by an Inner Sphere assault mech from 3025 on average. The AWS-8Q has more consistent and sustained fire than the Malice in almost all of its forms, including this ridiculously over-engineered, overpriced turd. The MALYZ will take a beating and keep on fighting. It'll be a slow, plodding mess that will struggle to pass piloting checks, while it does next to nothing to its opposition. It is the definition of a shameful display. Mechs like this are why the Republic fell, and part of why they deserved to fall. It's a rotten mech, draped in gold. As you can probably imagine, I am not a fan of the Malice in almost any of its forms. While any mech can be effective to some degree in any engagement, the Malice is just so badly thought out in any of its stated roles, and it is so poorly aligned between any of its features, that it is hard to understand why it is desirable to put this mech into the field in almost any conditions. Need direct fire support? There are just better, lighter mechs for that. Need an all-around assault mech? There are just better, equivalent, or lighter mechs for that. At almost every level, there are better mechs for cost. There are better mechs for BV as well, because it leans too heavily into expensive technologies both in-universe and on tabletop to ever truly be effective for its cost. At every turn, too, in every version of the mech, the solution is to add more technology, or in other words, to throw money at its shortcomings. But the shortcomings don't go away. They often just get worse, and they get more expensive. Even the best configuration, the XV, has a series of major problems. It just benefits more from change than it does from being an XP or an XT, or God forbid a YZ. Sincerely, just give me another mech, under almost any circumstances. It might even do well in a battle or two, but again, it's better off just having another mech, even in the instances where it did well. The Republic's procurement system was very clearly broken. The real question is, why were mercenaries so dumb to be duped into buying these things in large numbers? Genuinely, I'll never understand that one. The Malice is easily in the running for being one of the least functional war machines of the Dark Age, at least in terms of its cost to performance and survivability ratio. For every virtue it has, there is a dark, mirrored portion of the mech, reflecting away what was good about it, and delivering only something unsatisfactory in response. The Malice should have never been developed by the Republic. Its very existence is a symbol as to why the state died. It is, as I said at the start, the true totem mech for the Republic of the Sphere. It is a wasteful battle mech that never adequately does its job, or fills a niche worth having, all while being over-engineered and bizarrely distributed where it'd never be wanted. While it pains me genuinely to say this, that description fits the Republic itself just as well. The only thing more sad than the Malice and its performance is the fate of the state that built it. But hey, we can look into the past and we can see that even if a mech doesn't perform well on the battlefield, at least it can provide a decent morale boost by providing people with a wonderful fireworks display. I know. Be patient. Have faith. But what if you're wrong? What if you traded one devil for an even worse one? Devlin? Then it's a choice I'll bear all the way to my grave. Thank you for joining me here today. That's right, everyone, we've gotten all 4 voted mechs covered, including this blighted behemoth. Why did you guys ask me to cover this? I'll never know. If you enjoyed me running down this travesty of a battle mech, don't forget to hit like. It does help the channel, I promise. Also, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I've always got more content coming up, I promise. Next up, I'm planning on doing a Halloween special, and then after that, we're on to the Free Worlds League's Giuliano, as the final Dark Age mech I'll be covering before we go through Technical Readout 3055. As per usual, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all the channel members. I've said it before and I always mean it, this content is really only made possible by viewers like you. And in this instance, you guys literally voted for me to go through the pain of covering this, so thanks, I guess. If you want a punching bag to beat up on the tabletop, like in Battletech Aces maybe, it might be worthwhile to pick up the Malice. In the top comment for the video, there will be a resources post that includes links to TRO Dark Age, as well as Record Sheets Dark Age. So if you want to see this painful mech for yourself, you can, but you'll need to go through CGL's web store links, which are provided. Beyond that, if you want a physical manifestation of this humorously bad battle mech, I'll have links to Ironwind Metal sculpt for it as well, so you can acquire it and field it in-game, and either prove me wrong, or snicker as it is disabled and destroyed. I also wanted to say you'll notice that I had some beautiful backgrounds in this particular video. This is because I have acquired the permission to use Star Tech Design's art. He is a fantastic artist. There will be a link to his ArtStation page here, and a huge thank you to him for allowing me to use his work on my videos. It was great to reach out to him and hear back from him. By the way, these are going to be used in almost all of the upcoming videos on the channel for when we do the background pieces with the neon mechs during the technical breakdowns. I think they look pretty sharp, don't you? So with all of that, what did you think of the Malice? Do you agree with my overview? Let me know in the comments section below, and I will catch you all down there.